Okay, so I read Game Changer. Game Changer by Rachel Reed. It's the series that Heated Rivalry is based on. And I don't mean this as an insult to the books. I mean this as a compliment to everybody who worked on the show. But the show was so much better. The people who made the show put so much work into the intimacy coordination, into the lighting, into the acting, the direction, and it all comes together to tell the story extremely well. That said, the book I read was not Heated Rivalry. I'm reading that later. The book I read was Game Changer, the one the third episode is based on, and later part of episode 5. I think the episode did a really good job of adapting Game Changer in a short time frame. The only thing that stood out as slightly weird was that Kip and Scott seemed kind of older. Part of that's because Scott is older for an athlete, but that doesn't come across to the audience if he's only 25. And if Kip was 25, while this 30-something actor was dating him, it would look a lot creepier that he has like a kept man in his apartment, so they aged them both up. Honestly, I just headcanon that Kip was in jail for a while, and it doesn't break the timeline at all. Just when I saw him in that stupid hat, all I could think was of Ant-Man, where the main character is like, I have a degree in quantum physics, of course I can get a job, and then he can't even get a job at Baskin-Robbins. So, as we all know, our queen Ngozi Ukazu started the romance hockey trend. If anybody predated her, please let me know, I would like to read it. But she's who I first saw a big fandom around. And since I haven't really gotten into other hockey romance stuff because there's so much of it, like it's just everywhere. But obviously I decided to read this book because of the TV series. I read it in the middle of watching the actual TV show, so I read it after watching the Game Changer episode, but not before watching the rest of Heated Rivalry. So I'm not just gonna talk differences, but I am gonna go over some stuff that you get more details of. For one thing, so many more sex scenes because it's a whole book. If you're thinking, like if you're ever reading it and you're thinking, man, I would like to see this sex scene or something, it's gonna happen. Like 3 times as many sex scenes at least as what I read in Sarah Rash's novels. And I don't mean that as a compliment or an insult to either one. I think I actually prefer Sarah Rash's novels where there's that anticipation and build-up. But if you're here for a good time, not a long time, like I guess the Game Changer books are going to do it for you real quick. The episode that adapted it condensed so much of what happened, but the stuff it left out I did think was pretty good. Like a little more time spent on Kip and his dad, just like a little bit more that enriches it. There's a time that Scott gets crazy injured and Kip is super worried about it, and that always kind of gets me. That thing in sports movies where your favorite gets hurt, like I love that. You get to know a little bit more about Kip's friends and Scott's internalized homophobia issues, because while it really comes across in the TV show, he gets to explain in a much more detailed way exactly what it is. It's the fact that if you are a hockey player and if you go to an all-boys boarding school, being called a gay slur, like that's the worst thing you can be. It's seen as the ultimate form of disgust. And it's that disgust that Scott is reacting to. He's convinced that he won't get beat up in the locker room, but he's also convinced that he's going to lose most of his friends and that people aren't going to trust him, that it's going to damage his team's reputation. You just get a little bit extra from what's going on in his head without having to guess. The show portrayed that really well visually, but if you're looking to understand the character more deeply, or you were really annoyed at Scott over this, then maybe that will make it feel kind of better. So much of the story just is about Scott falling in love with Kip, and it's not just that he wants to come out so that he doesn't lose Kip, it's that he wants to come out because he is so tired of the fact that he has to be in the closet. He's so tired of the fact that he can't just go on dates, that he is supposed to keep this a secret. And he realizes, very importantly for the rest of the series, that what's so hard is being the first. The fact that nobody else has done this before, that no one knows how to handle it, how to talk about it, or what's going to happen to them. And that's ultimately the major reason that he decides to make a plan for coming out. And that's not a spoiler, that's obviously where the entire book is going. It's a coming out story. In Heated Rivalry, it's very sudden, but I love what it does when Scott does finally come out in the TV show. Because there's no plan for the audience, we are seeing it from the perspective of the rest of the world, not just Shane and Ilya, but we are seeing it from the perspective of everybody who was watching the first gay hockey player come out like this. It's a really good way to show the impact that Scott's decision had on the whole rest of the world. Because when you're reading the book, you know it's a big impact for him, and you know in the side of your mind it's a big impact for the rest of the league. But actually watching it in the show, seeing how it's portrayed, seeing everyone's reactions, it is so heavy. It's so big. They really did it justice. They gave it the weight that it deserves, and it's somehow weightier in the show because it's not just about Kip and Scott, because it's about the whole world. So that being said, it's not like the book does a disservice to the story, obviously. You have some nice stuff, like Scott coming out to his friends first, and then one of his friends arranging for them to have a private date at a discreet restaurant before they have to come out, so that they can have a private moment where he actually takes his boyfriend on a date, which Kip has been desperately wanting. You also get Kip's issues with insecurity, which aren't just based around being Scott's little hideaway. It's also based on his insecurities around his job, his inability to get hired without a master's degree in his field, which a lot of people in the humanities have experienced. This feeling of inadequacy, of not being enough because you need to be the best to succeed, or at least feeling this stagnation, like you just aren't doing enough. He eventually does convince himself to get a master's degree, which he was so insecure about and didn't think he was good enough for. And what's important isn't that he is going to get a master's degree, at least not to me. It's that he also got a better food service job, and that he is talking to more people, and that he is building his self-confidence. I'm going to read Heated Rivalry. If you want to read Game Changer, I think you can. If you're wondering if the adaptation left out a whole bunch, it left out some stuff, like all the steps Scott made in his plan to come out, but I don't think it's like necessary to fill in blank spots in the TV show if you're just interested in the TV show. I will say I read the audiobook and I don't really recommend it. The reader chose a really weird accent. Like, Kip is from Brooklyn, so Kip has a Brooklyn accent, but Kip is the only one with a Brooklyn accent, and it's so bad it sometimes sounds almost British. At the end, Ilya pops up and also sounds like... So the reader didn't seem to get that Ilya was Russian at any point, and when Ilya pops up at the end, the best I can describe his accent is Disco Stew from The Simpsons. So I'm hoping that that is better when he's reading Heated Rivalry. There you go. So yeah, let me know if you plan on reading the books, if you've finished the series, or if you're gonna rewatch it to look for that Game Changer dropout logo Easter egg in the 3rd episode. But yeah, I'm probably gonna rewatch the series at some point after I read the Heated Rivalry book. Okay.